Hello, Katie Webb. Welcome to the Doing CX Right show.
Thank you. Really excited to be here.
I am excited to be with you. We were on stage together at Reuters CX, and I was thrilled to have this conversation with you because it was a really lively dialogue, and we're going to continue where we left off, which the audience will soon hear.
Right.
Before then, please share, what do you do? What is your livelihood, Katie, at Afflac?
Oh, I love that. Like livelihood. So I head up our transformation and innovation for the company. I sit in the digital services organization, which most would know that as our IT organization. When you think about innovation and transformation, the way I like to think about it is innovation is what we do. So it's the capabilities and the experiences for our customers and our stakeholders. And transformation is how we do it. So it's our operating model, our talent, and our culture. So those two fit really well together.
Yeah. I don't know that people really think about IT organizations being CX minded. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I think for one, the company as a whole, when you think about it, it's a little odd to think about insurance and customer minded and experience. But Aflac really is. I mean, we have created a culture of the customers at the center. And I will say, joining Aflac, we are one of those companies that goes out of our way to figure out how to pay our customers, right? And it really is, it is ingrained in every single person, role, and function in the company. When you think about experience sitting in technology, what I think is unique is that experience has actually moved across the organization and throughout. So there's experience as a whole, which is everyone think about experience. Everyone owns the experience. And then there's experience as a function. And the function of experience, it was in marketing for a period of time where members of my team led CX within the marketing organization. We then moved over into operations. We sat in operations for a period of time, and then we are now in technology. And so really, though, each move that our team and CX has made within the company has honestly done nothing but grow it and honestly shape how we do experience differently. So when it sat in marketing, it was focused a lot on insights and strategies related to how do we relate better to customers. Still looked end to end and most broadly at CX, but really on how do you relate in order to talk to customers and in order to develop those marketing strategies best. And then, of course, other areas in the company use those CX insights, but that's really where there was a lot of focus and lens. Things around how to do conversion rates throughout the funnel. But then when we moved in operations, it was looking at things like onboarding, right? How do we onboard our customers? How do we onboard our clients? How do we onboard our producers differently and better? What does that claims experience look like and where are their gaps? And then when it moved into technology, now it started to say, well, how do we deliver capabilities? So not only how do we do it differently and better, but how do we now accelerate new capabilities? So honestly, I'll say if nothing else, just moving it around, it kept the same focus, but just expanded, right? And kind of took the colors of the area that it existed within.
I love how you describe that because CX has been a hot potato in
It is everywhere.
everywhere. And I love how you described the movement and the benefits really where it sits. And a lot of people are struggling. Where should CX sit? Where does it belong? And not everybody does realize that they impact the experience. So what you said is gold. Before we go deeper in that, I want to still allow a chance for people to get to know you, Katie. And that is, share something that people might not know about you, personally or professionally.
I'll do personally. So some that work with me know this about me, but I am a corporate girl by day and rodeo by night. So I do barrel racing. I compete pretty competitively in barrel racing. I've done it since I was 5 years old. So I live on 40 acres. We have a ranch. I have about 10 horses that are in training. So I train and I also jockey my own horses. And I raise a few every now and then, but mostly just train and compete. So just last weekend, I took my whole family and we were gone and competing for the whole weekend, and then come back on Monday and I'm back in the office.
Oh, that is a very fun fact. And
Yeah.
I'm learning a lot about horses and racing as my family members all pooled money together to have a horse. And I'm going to watch the race
Are you
in
kidding?
in 2 weeks. Yeah.
Oh,
So I'm
fun.
learning this world.
Yeah. Well,
Hmm.
barrel racing, it is pretty much like a horse race that everyone knows, the Kentucky Derby, but with turns. So it's a short period of time, time bound. It's an electric eye, and it's a race with turns. And so it's a timed event, just like with thoroughbreds, but it's quarter horses.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of a race, I feel like our lives are a race. I mean, here we are at this this moment in time in 2024. Don't know how we got here, but looking backwards for a moment to your younger 20-year-old self. This is my favorite question of I ask all my guests, and I love to know, what would you tell the younger you based on all that you know now?
I love that. I think the most important thing I would want to tell myself, if there's a path that doesn't exist, that you can create your own. Because I think, when you're young, you're in college, or even not in college, and you're trying to decide what you want to do, who you want to be, where your passion is, and you don't fit in a perfect box, that sometimes you don't realize that you can build your own box. You don't have to fit into one that already exists. And I look back at my career now and think, I didn't really know that what I do today was even an option, because it wasn't necessarily something that was defined in a course curriculum. So that's my biggest piece of advice is, if you're passionate enough about something and it doesn't exist, that you can create your own.
Mm, that's beautiful. And I agree with you. In fact, I started doing CX right way before I even knew that I'd need it, I'd want it, I'd know what I would do with it. And so I was in corporate exactly nights and weekends the way you have your passion. And so I hope people listening realize that you have two people here who literally would spend their off time doing their passion, loving what they do. So everything's possible for sure.
That's right.
All right. So let's get to knowing this is the Doing Customer Experience Right show. What does customer experience mean to you? Everyone has different perspectives.
Yeah. I have two thoughts here. I always have multiple options, right? And so, two thoughts I have. One is that customer experience is highly subjective. And very often, or oftentimes, it's a box to be checked, I feel like, in some companies or places, right? Where we either have it as a tagline, we put the customer at the center of what we do. I think we could all, if we had a penny for every time we said that, I don't even have to say a dime. We could say a penny, that we'd be rich, right? Every company is kind of touting that we put the customer at the center. And I think even if you were to count the number of, hey, we have a CX team, that's a box to be checked. But when I think about customer experience, I think more about, how do your customers feel and what do they say? It's less about what is your strategy, what templates do you use, what practices and what job profiles does your company have? And it's more about what the customers feel and what they say. And that could change over time. I do think customer experience right is when there's a consistent notion, like there's a consistent feeling of, this is a company that I'm getting value out of and I'm getting the return on my investment, and that I would advocate for. And so I think that. So that's one lens. The other lens when I think about customer experience is the thought that really exceptional customer experience is not just about meeting the needs of the customer. So a lot of times CX exists to say, what do customers tell us they want? And how do we do that in the best way possible? And when I think about really great customer experience, I think it's really about understanding the needs and the pain points of that customer, but then translating that into unspoken desires. So translating all those insights into things that customers don't even know to ask for. And that's why I do think that there's so much correlation with experience and strategy, and experience and innovation. And I put innovation and with strategy and with experience and with marketing. I feel like they're so all tightly coupled because it really is what makes the difference in how you go to market.
Mm. So it seems so intuitive, yet there's a lot of challenges. And what would you say gets in the way?
Well, there's a lot that could get in the way. I think sometimes, although it's well intentioned, when everyone owns something, no one owns it.
Mm.
And so a lot of times what happens is if everyone owns improving something, in this case, it could be the customer experience, but if everyone owns improving X and there's no clear vision of what X is and how to get there, then everyone is going to come to their own conclusion. And especially in a large organization where there are inherent silos, it can be very easy to come up with 500 solutions to the same problem, and none of them are compounding. So in fact, it'd be great if you have 500 compounding solutions that all add on top of each other to one really great experience in this case. But typically what you find is that everyone's trying to do the right thing, but because of these inherent silos or barriers, oftentimes they end up solving that in a way that they don't all work together. And in some ways, they can even contradict each other, right? So someone might say, in order to improve the experience, I need to make it easier. So that means remove steps. And someone might say, well, in order to make the experience better, I need it to be more intuitive, which means I need to explain it more, which means I need to add steps to it. And so then you get this kind of Frankenstein of an experience where you've kind of added additional context where not needed, or you've taken away things that remove context. And then you've ended up with an experience that the customer really is lost and it's not solving what they're trying to do. So you do need some way to create a common vision in the organization, because at the end of the day, even if you can't have one person that is saying this is what the experience is, you need a common vision and understanding of the how and what that looks like. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So then, if a company has set forth a vision and there's a conductor of the band,
Yeah.
everyone has to bring their instruments. They also have to understand that they have a customer experience role. So, do you have any strategies for people listening on how to get that shared commitment and unify the communications, unify the actions? What have you seen work?
Well, I do think that, and I'm not going to use customer experience, I'm going to use experience design.
Mm-hmm.
Because experience design, and there's many flavors of experience design, I do believe is a competency and a practice. And then you can apply it in unlimited scenarios. It can be whether you're doing any kind of strategy, business, marketing, customer, right? But there's a design, an experience design. And I think if you've got an individual, or if you don't have anyone in your organization that understands experience design practices and frameworks, that then you yourself, or if you're just an individual who wants to do more, can learn some of those and then bring them to the table to help really develop strategy that's driven through the customer lens, through an experience design path. So that's the competency and the practice. But one of the things that we've seen work really well is simply getting people in a room together. So for instance, we talk about this as everyone owns the experience, but then there's also an experience function in the organization. So typically what we've done in the past is we'll actually do workshops. And half the time people eye roll at workshops because it's everyone gets in a room, you do the same exercise and nothing comes of it. If we get in a room together and we spend 2 to 3 days together, how do we make sure we walk out of here and this wasn't a failure? Like that's got to be the first question you ask, right? But the big thing is you get in a room together. And if you've got experienced folks that have experience, right, in some of those frameworks and methodologies, phenomenal, because you can have them come in and help facilitate a session where you then are bringing together all the parties who touch a specific area or experience. So you could say, in this case, it might be claims, right, with Afflac. And we bring those teams in one room. And even though we don't have one person that owns claims, because think about a company with Afflac, and there's multiple areas that have some way and form that they touch the claims experience, right? But if you bring everyone in a room together, you might have one person that you ultimately say, this person defines exactly how the experience is end to end. But if you can get everyone in a room together and you can go through an exercise where you're saying, let's co-create that vision together. How do we want the customer to feel? Let's imagine what that experience is like. Let's storyboard it out. Let's visualize it. Visualization is a very powerful tool. And if we can all visualize it, and then we can list out some of the qualities of it, right? We have principles that help guide that experience. If we can put together some of those, I hate to use the word artifacts because sometimes those become lost things. But the exercise alone, even if you walk away and you don't pick something up and look at it again, like we've created run books and strategy books that we've used, but sometimes they don't get referenced, but everyone remembers the conversation and they remember the direction. And it can be across operations, technology, even our sales teams, right? Marketing gets in the room. And we were all there together to create a shared vision of what that experience feels like. And then we've built those relationships that we can work together as we then kind of disseminate and go off. And so I think that's one way where you can kind of create that shared vision. And even some of those roadmaps. We even co-created roadmaps together and then divvied them up across teams so that we could all work independently, but have alignment. And so I think those kind of sessions where you come together, then disperse and come back together, we're looking at quarterly, how do we do that better, right? But that's how you can kind of create that shared cohesion all around the experience.
Mm-hmm. I think that is absolutely a must. It's not negotiable.
Yeah.
With that said, I think it's also important people understand that not only is that valuable to help people understand the domino effect of how each role affects the other, because people do think in silos and don't realize, oh, how what I'm doing affects the next person, and then the customer feels it. I think there's also an aspect of validating what was designed with real customers.
Yes.
What's your view on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we all know that everyone in some way or form believes that we understand or we know, right? We know what the customer needs. We know what they want. One of the critical components, I feel like experience design is a key competency, right? And that is something that everyone should have in their toolkit. In some shape or form, you should learn some type of experience design, human-centered design approach. It just really adds a lot of value to have that in your toolkit. But then you also have to learn, there's a lot of methodologies out there around experimentation, test and learn, lean startup, right? And so again, these are all different tools that someone can take in their toolkit. But if you learn as a company as how to do that in a culture, it's really powerful. So when you can combine experience design, which is really more of the strategy piece, right? How do you take insights, and information and translate that into hypotheses, right? I'm going to use the word hypotheses there because they're hypotheses on how we can deliver capabilities and experiences to our customer to solve a problem, to deliver value back to the business. But then you have to have a way that you then take those hypotheses and validate them. And that's where you have to have a means in order to validate those hypotheses before you spend millions of dollars in resources or even hundreds of thousands in developing something that isn't meaningful. So there's a lot of different frameworks that exist out there. You've got design sprints, right? A lot of different ones that are that everyone has labeled. Pick your poison, or in this case, pick your recipe, right? And really what we do, and that's why the innovation team has worked so well with CX. Before we were the innovation lab, and I've got Hatch Innovation Lab as a digital accelerator. I like to say it's an experience innovation lab though. And before we formally launched the innovation lab 5 years ago, we were CX delivery. And what that meant was we had CX strategy that did all the insights, the research, and I say artifacts, but it really was strategy, right? And then we paired that with a team that specialized in speed to market, fail fast, test and learn. And when we combined those forces, we really had a way to not only uncover opportunities, to validate quickly, fail the things that didn't work, and then put the things that did in front of a business case that had real data, real insights, and was validated. And so it allowed a lot of the things that traditionally we couldn't get off the ground, or we couldn't get funded, or we couldn't get prioritized, to get prioritized because we had real data from real customers, because we did proof of concepts and pilots. So we had to build the muscle of how to test and fail fast.
Mm. It's so important. I hope listeners understand and apply this, because you do waste so much time and money and resources
Mhm.
if you're not doing these practices rather than launch and hope it sticks.
Yeah.
That's not the way to do
No.
this. I mean, I really learned that a lot working at Verizon, and there was some departments that really understood. In fact, CX sat within new product development, but yet all the other departments really were glued together. So it was well done. Not all companies or organizations do it that way, but I love how you're doing it, and I hope people understand. Let me dive into measurements for a second.
Sure.
How does someone know that they're doing it right or they have to pivot? Do you have a favorite metric?
No, because it really just depends. Every experience has a different definition of successful. Sometimes there can be ease scores. So if someone's completing something, there's your typical studies of task completion and were they able to complete what they came for. But then there's the how easy. We have a metric that we actually use that says how easy was this experience for you, and then to add comments. Sometimes it can be a financial metric, like did you increase
Mm,
sales or revenue? There's all kinds of metrics that really depend on that experience, whether it's a pre-sale, post-sale. So ultimately for us, it's about we use leading and lagging indicators, right? It's using that ultimate goal of what you're trying to do. And usually every company has those financial metrics at the very top that you're looked at, right? Operational cost, revenue growth. And then you dial that back down to the leading indicators that tie to that experience, right? And
mm,
so, really, what we do is when we set up an experiment, if it's to improve a claims experience, we look at all the different facets and we usually settle on a few of those claims experiences. Now, here's the thing about claims. There can be times when the experience could have been delightful, but the outcome of that claim was not delightful because maybe it didn't get paid, but it didn't get paid because it really didn't qualify for a claim, right? And so
mm.
there are situations where even if the experience was intuitive and easy and delightful as they could have been, the outcome might not exactly be what they want. Sometimes you have to understand that in certain businesses, that does happen. But really, if we can look at whether that's the claims ease score, sometimes we look at the net promoter score that they look at. We look at their retention rates and their persistency rates of did they stay with us. There's usually those metrics that always tie together, and we do try to find measures for every experiment that we run. And I'll say there have been very few experiments, if any, that we've not been able to actually have measurable impact on the lift that it's provided. And I want to dispel the myth that some feel that, you can't measure experience. And while it's true sometimes to isolate exactly what in the experience was the thing that really clicked, it will show up in your persistency or retention. We call it persistency, how the policy persists, but it will show up in your retention. If customers stay with you, right, longer, their experience is going to be more delightful, right? If customers buy more from you, that customer lifetime value. So you can see it in your financials. You just have to figure out how to do those, what I would call control, holdout, and pilot groups, right? And so we do a lot of those where we can then tie back and say, this group that got the new experience showed this increase, right? And so there's ways that you can isolate behavior to experiences to then deliver business value and measure it and communicate that. So there's not one metric because everything that we do has probably some different lens of a metric that we'll use, but we always do have metrics. That is a key.
Yeah. Leadership, we know, is so important. What is the best leadership advice you've given or received?
Wow, that is tough. I would say two. So one, one piece of advice that I was given was probably about 10 years ago. And I was new to Afflac. And I came in and I had a ton of ideas. And I was in marketing. I was in product marketing at the time. And I had a ton of ideas that really had very little to do with actually the marketing of the product and more with how we went to market in general and what products we offered. It's kind of out of my lane. But I had all kinds of ideas. And at the time, our CMO, I sat down and he said, I just want to tell you that sometimes, you can get beat down, right? Because you'll hear no, or we've tried that, or that's been done before 5 years ago. Somebody brought that up. And he told me, he said, I never want you to lose that fire, never lose that passion, because that is what is the differentiator. And it really stuck with me because we've all, especially in corporate America, it's very easy in large organizations for ideas to have been tried or to be told, oh, we've tried that, we've done that, that'll never happen here. But I think if you can separate that and figure out what you're really passionate about and you bring that every day, to me as a leader, I want to work for passionate leaders. So therefore, I try to think about myself as a leader and say, I want people to see that passion. And the flip side of that is I always want to be the energy in the room that I want to walk into. And so whether that's a leader or an individual contributor, I do think that energy is contagious, negative or positive, right? And so if you walk into a room and everyone's frustrated or everyone's kind of shut off, it really creates an entire environment. And so as a leader, I always want to be the one to set the energy of that room that I wish it was when I go into. And oftentimes I find that you can affect that in others and in the room.
Exactly. Ditto. Yes. Yes. And I especially hope that managers, leaders of contact centers are also listening to this because agent experience is so challenging and it's undervalued and they really need empowering leaders. So I really encourage those that are managing call centers, especially to apply this wisdom. Final question.
Okay.
And that is the key takeaway you want people to remember today.
I would say it's everyone's responsibility to understand and know your customer. Everyone should, right? And I said that earlier with everyone owns it, no one owns it, but everyone should own it. Everyone should think about how do we improve that experience every day and what role do I play? But then the next thought should be, now, how do I get everyone else on board? How do we link arms together? How do I build cohesion across the team? How do I build that circle? Because it's not just about what's my role in it, but it's then how do I connect that organization regardless of the boundary lines? So that key takeaway for me is it's everyone's responsibility, but it's also everyone's responsibility to bring the others in, right? And so no one's going to do it for you. No one's going to clear boundary lines or break silos. That doesn't exist. You have to be the one to reach across, pull people in, get them in a room together and solve the problem.
And my last statement to that is whether you're a CEO or an intern.
That's right.
And everything in between, this applies to you.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, thank you, Katie, so much for being here. I loved every minute, and I'm going to include in the show notes your social media and Afflac and all that so people can get in touch.
That's great. Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Thank you.